This program is brought to you by the James S. Holloway Foundation, supporting business development through a combination of international outreach and community initiatives, and the Ted and Ann Warner
James and
Foundation,
Ann
innovating community.
Alfred D.
And listeners that are like you. You're welcome. Welcome to Homestead Moments with Ben Balmer, where the sky is blue, the doors are unlocked, and the house soup is always minestrone. I remember the first time I ran away from home. My dad told me what hot dogs were made of, and I just stared at him. I stared at him across the kitchen table. I just had it. And then he told me that I would never be a businessman. He told me I had to go into the arts like he did. I ran across the street to Dill Eastman's house. I said I'd wait it out. I don't know. Dill Eastman always seemed like he was a little afraid of me. But that's not the point, I guess. After I had finished staring into the sunset and saying that I'd never become an arts person, become a financier like I wanted to, and Dill looked at me, and with a wry smile he said, "But Ben, you can't read." Rick Roberts hadn't ridden a tricycle in 35 years. But that day he got on one. He stared at the handlebars, newly minted silver, felt them in his hands, he felt the power, and he started to tricycle. Down Main Street, past the avenue, the same avenue that I crossed to get to Dill Eastman's house, and right out of town. You could say he was running away from home. But he had never felt like he had a home in the first place. He reached the outskirts of town, still tricycling along at a brisk pace for a tricycle. The words still stung in his head. The words said to him at confessional earlier that morning. I mean, he only went because he was infatuated with the concept of regret, but what are you gonna do? The priest looked him square in the eye and said to him,
Rick, the Lord doesn't forgive, and the Lord doesn't forget. He only watches, and he makes you pay for what you've done. He makes you pay in Bitcoin.
At that point, Rick regretted that he hadn't followed his father's advice and went into macroeconomics. Nancy Adonis had lived her life in a kind of discontented peace, her house abutting Route 67. When she walked out past her blue picket fence one morning to find someone tricycling by her house, she thought to herself, I wish I were young enough to tricycle, or old enough to not care what people think. Her sister walked outdoors next to her, and didn't say, but thought.
Why is Nancy still alive?
They had a strained relationship. He passed a strip mall on his way south and stared at it, wondering why civilization kept going, why the order resisted against the natural chaos. And then he got hungry, so he stopped by an abandoned restaurant. It was still filled with food, stacks and stacks of cornbread, No Mater D was to be found, the only one the place had ever had run away a long time ago, overcome by an overwhelming fear of food. He picked a fork up off the floor and began to dissect a chunk. When Dill Eastman and I were 7, we decided to start an artichoke stand. It was an attraction in the middle of town, although nobody really passed through that kind of middle. We hung posters all over the place, and no one showed up. 30 years later, a guy shows up at my door with a poster in his hand asking for an artichoke. We talked for 20 minutes and learned more about each other than we had ever learned about ourselves up to that point. I remember Dill Eastman getting so mad at me that day, shouting, You're the reason no one came. They're afraid of you. Hell, I was afraid of myself. Rick finally met his death outside the cornbread restaurant. He was hit straight on by a truck. The official truck for the Jewish homosexual clown retreat. Weirdly enough, their painter had accidentally painted the truck Clowns for Christ, so they were always a little ashamed. They all walked out of the truck, 47 clowns in a 12-seater van, and stared at the body. They quickly packed all 47 back into the truck and ran away as fast as possible. They were afraid of hell. Weirdly enough, where they were going to go anyways. Out of all things, for gluttony. We all have our reasons for running away. More often than not, it's fear, you know? Fear of order, fear of chaos, fear of food. I'd like to say I'm not afraid of many things. Neither did Rick. I guess that's why he ran away. He had a fear of not being afraid. By the time Rick was hit by the truck, he'd come exactly back to the place where he had hopped on his tricycle. But how could he tell from the signs? He couldn't read them.